Hey everyone, Dinosaur here, and today we're talking about the worst cards from my favorite archetypes. Apple Magician Girl is the level 3 addition to the Magician Girl archetype, debuting in the Dark Side of Dimensions movie pack. If she's targeted for an attack, you get to special summon a level 5 or lower spellcaster type monster from your hand, and change the attack target to the new monster, and have the attack of the attacking monster. This effect sounds good, but battle tricks like this are usually evaded if your opponent just bothers to read your cards or even ask about the effects. On top of that, the monster she has to special summon can only be from your hand, and we can't even get our beloved Dark Magician Girl as it has to be level 5 or lower. Her second effect to return other Magician Girl monsters from your graveyard to your hand is also pretty useless. This is a deck that benefits off of Magicalized Fusion and using 5 different named spellcaster monsters to make Quintet Magician, so bringing your monsters back often doesn't come up or can't. You might say that Dark Magician Girl has an arguably worse effect, and while that's technically true, Dark Magician Girl can be used as fusion material for Dark Magician Girl the Dragon Knight, a much more powerful card, and she has plenty of other synergies as well, say with the Dark Magicians and Magicians combination. So Apple Magician Girl falls into the worst in archetype category for Magician Girls. Embrace of the Tistina, the continuous trap card printed in the second wave of support in Age of Overlord, lets you flip an opponent's monster face down when they activate an effect. This doesn't negate the effect, by the way, just flips the monster that activated the effect. During the end phase of the turn, you can take control of an opponent's face down monster permanently. Each of these effects is a hard once per turn, and here's where the card fails, can only be activated while you control a Tistina monster with 3,000 or more defense. This is a horrific restriction to put on a card like this. It's already subpar at best, with basically just being a Book of Moon with some extra steps. This restriction means you have to either have Crystal God Tistina, the hardest Tistina monster to summon, or Tistina the divinity that defies darkness, the rank 10 monster, on your board in order to even activate this card and its effects. Even if you control one of those monsters and you get to flip a monster, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to activate the end phase effect, given that neither of those monsters have protection, just some on-destruction effects that are good but not good enough to make this card playable. Embrace will probably always be the worst Tistina card, as even if new support is printed in the future, I doubt it'll be anything close to this bad. Eanoc, Sentry of the Ghoti, is a very cool looking card, but that's about where we stop. Its normal or special summon effect is actually pretty good, but it rarely comes up in a duel, making him a nasty brick to have in your hand, as it doesn't have a way to special summon itself, and is a level 6, so you have to tribute summon it on top of that. Most Ghoti duelists aren't exactly making much use of trap cards, so his second effect is really only used if you're building around his effect specifically, which could work, by the way, we just don't see it as it's inconsistent. Being a level 6 monster that can't special summon itself is actually pretty rough when there are 2 slots in the deck already being taken up by level 6 fish, like Sykes and Snopios, that can summon themselves, and often for almost free. So Eanoc gets left in the abyss most of the time when it comes to deck building. You can say whatever you want about this one, but Altergeist Fijialert is just not a card that works with the archetype very well. When you summon an Altergeist Link monster, you get to choose another Link monster you control and special summon Fijialert to an arrow that Link monster points to, then that Link monster is treated as an Altergeist monster. Altergeist does suffer from the fact that all their Link monsters require only Altergeist monsters in order to summon, so this effect seems like it could actually help a lot. However, this effect is so restricted that it'll never happen. Altergeist, at least when this card was released, was a deck that didn't really put up enough material to fully link climb on turn 1 to make an end board, so it relied on generic trap cards like Skill Drain and Solemn Judgment. This is not to say that Altergeist was bad, as it made use of the trap cards and comboed off of them, and could even still be a viable strategy to this day. So, when you're already low on resources, this card wants you to make a non-Altergeist Link monster, presumably with downward-facing arrows, then summon an Altergeist Link monster so you can get 1 extra material and treat something as an Altergeist monster. This effect is actually pretty convoluted and tricky to pull off, as you already have to have it wasting away in your hand first. Nowadays, Altergeist is a bit more on the combo side of things, with cards like Paratrader, Malwisp, and Adminia bringing some pretty serious endboards and OTK lines, even making Drag Viren an accessible endboard piece. Because of all this, we don't need a card like Fijialert in the strategy, and it'll be left in the binder until another level 4 water Altergeist is printed. Of course, for Bahamut Shark reasons. Now, of course, if you're thinking, Dana, why is Tenpai one of your favorite archetypes? The answer is just that I like it. But you know what I don't like? Sangen Furo. This card, just like its artwork, is a massive brick. Tenpai did not need a continuous spell that has a battle trick, and certainly didn't play it when the deck was even at its peak. Even now, with half of the engine on the limited list, it still doesn't want to play Furo. The setback from Grave can be pretty nice actually, as it lets you recycle a Kaiman during your opponent's end phase if you need to, but that's a really rare case and not worth running a whole slot in your deck for, even at 1. Not to mention that this format where Ryziel is running rampant, this card will be in your grave first if they even decide it's worth destroying. I like the Tenpai IP and the artwork on this card, but it'll forever just stay in my bulk box unless something gets printed making this card work very well. Adamancipator was a deck that I started my competitive Yu-Gi-Oh journey playing, and I didn't even know this card existed when I was playing it. It is, of course, part of the Adamancipator story, as all of the synchros have crystal versions like this, but even the Synchro Leonite rarely sees play in Adamancipator decks anymore. The best way to describe this card's effect is nothing. It does nothing. Recycling an Adamancipator card to the top of your deck is only relevant if you have the cards to extend past that. Chances are you've already used every card in your graveyard, so you won't be able to again, so there isn't much point unless you plan on drawing it. And at least in modern builds, they're not really going for anything like that. Its second effect is also pretty useless, as there isn't really a fire synchro monster that is played, so you have to use up an extra deck space just so you can play this brick. Adamancipator decks usually already play the Crystal Dragite, as at least it draws a card. But even this card could be cut from the deck and is a brick in hand. It's just a water monster that turns on Risen Dragite's effect. So Leonite is usually kicked to the curb that is the bulk box. To follow up with rock monsters, the Magnet Warriors have a pretty rough card of their own. Magnet Conversion is the trap card that just does not work with the main boss monster Berserkion. Thankfully, this card does say up to 3 Magnet Warrior monsters, so you aren't locked into having at least 3 in the graveyard in order to activate, but that's all it's doing. You can add a single banished level 4 or lower Magnet Warrior to your hand by banishing this card from your graveyard as well. Unfortunately, this effect is just not good. If you have already summoned Berserkion, it means you want to use his effect to destroy your opponent's cards. So you'll be banishing the Magnet Warriors from your graveyard, making the first effect of this card useless. The second effect is just way too late to be of any use, and any kind of recurrence that you need can just be done with Epsilon. So this card doesn't even get thought about anymore, except maybe in Speed Duel and Dinosaur videos sometimes. This isn't exactly a card from an archetype, but more of a deck. Nightmare Magician is a card that holds some sentimental value to me, and people thought it was going to be a great card initially. It turns out just falls short in a lot of places. Unlike a lot of the Chimera cards, the archetype this card was supporting when it was released, it only has an effect on field, and you guessed it, it's a battle trick. Clearly supposed to be another world's Dark Magician. Dark Magician being a spellcaster, and Nightmare Magician being an illusion. This card has no synergy with the Dark Magician cards, however, and can only rarely be found in a more pure Chimera build, with its only synergy being an illusion monster. Destroying something on your opponent's field during the battle phase is great, and taking control of an opponent's monster is also pretty good, but it just happens too late. By the time you're able to get this card in the field, chances are your opponent is going to be relieved, seeing that you were working only to get to Nightmare Magician. Now, there are plenty of other cards that are just way better at being an illusion monster that does something. notably Diabelle's, forcing your opponent to play very carefully around her. And for this, Nightmare Magician ends up out of decks and in the trade binder waiting for someone to come along and like his artwork. Spright has a legacy of being an incredible meta deck and being extremely competitive. Spright Pixies, however, was often cast aside. The replica Honest of Spright was looked at as a tech card or just another level 2 Spright monster. Its effects didn't matter too much and only really helped with an OTK involving Gigantic Spright and Ketchark. Pixies can also only be used during the battle phase. We're seeing some similarities amongst our bad cards here, right? And that just is never very good. The card also only increases the monster's attack by 1400, so sometimes it isn't even enough. Most duelists didn't waste their time on Pixies, and sad it'll remain as the worst Spright monster, though I think he's pretty cool. Shining Sarcophagus doesn't have too many cards to the archetype, so Stronghold the Moving Fortress, while being a card that is often included in decks, is easily the worst of the cards. Stronghold is sometimes excluded just because it can be a brick to open and doesn't further your endboard much. It really only sees play because you can set it from your deck with Gadget Trio, easily one of the best cards of the archetype. Just like most of the cards on this list, this card has a battle trick effect. It even relies on your opponent declaring an attack while you control Shining Sarcophagus, making it even more rare to happen. This card really does only see play because of Gadget Trio, and like I said before, some duelists don't even bother including it and just use the space for something else. Stronghold will always be a consideration for my builds, however, and I think it's a great card to end on here. So I've done videos on every single one of the archetypes in this video except for Altergeist, which will be coming soon, I can assure you that. But I love talking about bad cards in this game. I love playing rogue decks, trying to make bad cards work in good decks. It's so fun to me. So if you have a favorite bad card from an archetype that you like, feel free to drop it in the comments and I might cover it in a future video, or we could just have a discussion about it down there. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.